Everyone has a sense of free will, that we are free to think and act on our own accord. We take responsibility for our actions and choices, and we hold others accountable to their own. If asked whether or not we have free will, I'd have to answer yes. I mean, our ideas of ethics and our legal system are based on it. But on the other hand, I'd also have to say no. We're obviously not in complete control of what we intend to do. Just now I wanted to go to the gym, but I missed a turn and kept going straight toward my home by route. I wasn't explicitly aware of the drive, but some part of me must have been aware. I was driving after all. Which part of me controlled my drive here? All the micro movements of manipulating the wheel and pedals and taking in the details of the other cars and the road, all of that I wasn't explicitly aware of and can't even recall. We do things so-called unconsciously all the time. When we talk about free will, what most of us are referring to is whether or not we as individuals are free to intentionally decide and act on our own accord. So to discuss this, it helps to first define what we mean by the individual. When I say I have free will, what is the I I'm referring to? From the materialist viewpoint, I'm just a mechanical physical body with a nervous system that predetermines my choices and actions. But most of us don't identify with the mere mechanics of our neuronal activity. We identify with what it represents. Our sense of self, our identity, is tied to our memories of the past, current desires and values, and hopes for the future. So when I say I have free will, I mean it's the part of me that wants to sustain myself, to improve my life, and act in beneficial ways. That's the part of me that's free to decide and act. I'm choosing to work out right now because I want to develop my body and improve my health. I feel like I'm free to do so. But am I really? Do we really have free will? We have a sense that we're free to choose our thoughts and actions based on our past experiences and future intentions. And when we say we're free to choose, we mean that when we make a choice, we could have chosen otherwise. For example, I chose to work out at the gym and then I planned to go for a hike outside. I was free to make these choices based on my own preferences and desires. I wasn't forced into them by anything outside of me. But is it possible to be completely free? There seems to be a lot of things outside ourselves that influence our choices. Aren't the life experiences that condition our tendencies and desires outside of ourselves? Do we have control of all the conditions in which we grew up, the influence of friends, family, society, and media on our preferences and dispositions? Can we really be free of past conditioning in any given moment? We may think we're free to act on our will, but are we free to will in the first place? We don't choose our next thoughts, they just bubble up from somewhere. Are we really free to choose what we desire or prefer? As Schopenhauer asked, we may be free to act according to our wants, but can we want what we want? Let's say I have a desire that I wish I didn't have. Can I make myself not want it anymore? One part of me wants to do this hike for exercise right now, but another part of me doesn't. I feel compelled to make these videos, but it can be difficult with my full-time work schedule and being a single dad. To be honest, I wish I didn't have the compulsion to do this. I wish I was content with my regular desk job and lifestyle. Even if we say we are free to act according to what we want, is what we want completely free of outside agency? Did I really choose what appeals to me in life completely on my own?
Did my upbringing, my environment, my parents, and relationships not have anything to do with it? Did I not have any social and personal conditioning outside of my personal volition? If we assume our thoughts, decisions, and actions are the byproduct of conditioning that came before, that's a deterministic outlook. And if we knew all the exact details of that conditioning up to this point, we would be able to predict the exact choices we would make right now. If everything is determined by that past conditioning, my choice to come here instead of staying in the gym would never have been different. I would have made the exact same decision a million times over. Unless randomness is involved, randomness seems to be the answer to this free will debate. Adding randomness makes choices probabilistic. Maybe I had a 55% chance of choosing to end my workout with a hike, because a random thought could have swayed my decision either way. Or I could have randomly received a new piece of information. For example, if I haphazardly looked at my phone and saw a forecast of rain, I likely would have decided to stay in the gym and not come here today. Or what about seemingly arbitrary decisions that have a 50-50 chance of going either way, like this fork in the road? I choose this way. Most of us believe in free will and have an intuition that we must have it, but it's hard to justify that we are completely free of all of our past experiences, conditioning, and influences, unless randomness is involved. But randomness doesn't seem quite right either. I didn't have a strong inclination one way or the other just now. It felt like an arbitrary, haphazard decision. But I still made that decision based on some impulse. I call it random because I'm not aware of the rationale of that impulse. But that may be all that randomness really means, not knowing the determining causes. I'm going to fly my drone right now to make the point. We call something random when we don't know the broader perspective, the underlying causal chain of events or predictable pattern.
Randomness only means I don't know why something is happening. Like these cars on the highway. It looks like they're randomly exiting and I can't predict which car will exit next. But just because I can't discern a definite pattern doesn't mean there isn't one. The drivers that exit intend to exit. And if I knew the intended destination of each driver, I would be able to predict the pattern of exits. But since I don't know the exact details of each driver's intentions, the flow of traffic only appears random to me.
There may be no such thing as random. The materialist may be right in one way. My choices and actions are determined, but they're determined by me. They're determined by what I identify with. My collection of preferences, tendencies, and desires. But if we grant that determining conditions are at play in forming my disposition and propensity to make certain choices, how free am I to change them right now? Can I freely change what I want to want? Bernardo Kastrup gives a provocative example that if this were really possible, even if he were locked up in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison, he would be able to choose to be the happiest man on earth. He would choose to want to be locked up in isolation. But because of our evolutionary desires to survive and to rely on social interactions to do so, we can't naturally want that.
When considering things we do want, we feel like we have some amount of executive control when making choices. But there may be no CEO or executive decision maker who hears out all the arguments and objectively weighs them to adjudicate on the decision. If there is, it may not be purely objective, but rather easily influenced by emotions. When we're deliberating on a decision, we may really only be allowing ourselves to be swayed by the emotions each argument conjures. But all this may bubble up from a place we're not explicitly aware of. They may not even bubble up at times. We may not have immediate access to the rationale that triggers our emotions and impulses. They may be what most people call unconscious. And we know of the Vedanta and Buddhist perspectives that the separate personal self is an illusion. If that's true, any freedom of this personal self will be an illusion too. But that doesn't mean that there's no absolute reality beyond the illusion of self. Vedantists would admit the relative truth of the world, and the fact that this illusory world is made up of and is nothing other than the absolute reality. And yet spiritual traditions have to assume free will, or at least the fact that it's as if we have free will. Encouraging spiritual activities, development, and realization would depend on this. After all, we are the ones that have to decide on doing spiritual practices. Bernardo Castro refers to the question of free will as a red herring, a distraction from what's really going on. Perhaps what gets closer to the truth is that Vedanta's single underlying reality is the only thing completely free, and we just experience a distributed and limited version of that absolute freedom. But with this limited freedom, we should take responsibility for our thoughts, choices, and actions. We should live as if we are completely free. The concept of free will promotes a feeling of empowerment in our lives, and our belief in it alone may influence our actions. We should try to better ourselves in our lives, to train ourselves to think and act more positively and spiritually. Even if free will is an illusion, all illusions are based on an ultimate reality. At our core, we must be free.
I believe that our true nature is one pure and universal consciousness. It's all there is, and therefore can't be influenced by anything outside itself. We are segmented individual minds and bodies within this broader consciousness, and therefore have a limited distribution of the complete freedom of our true nature. And while we can still act responsibly as if we have free will, recognizing this limitation can be of use too. It can help alleviate the torment of regret about our past actions, or anxiety about future ones. It can cut us some slack when we put too much pressure on ourselves, when we feel overwhelmed as insignificant individuals within a sea of other people and a universe of natural forces outside of our control. We don't have to carry the burden of all that pressure ourselves as individual agents. We're part of a much broader perspective, a much broader universal process. So with this balance of limitation and freedom, we can feel both relieved and empowered. Like and comment if this resonated with you, and subscribe below to follow me on my journey. See you next time.